State Senator Denny Hoskins has spent the last few years trying to legalize sports betting in Missouri. But the Warrensburg Republican has faced a torrent of opposition at every turn and has failed in his attempts to succeed legislatively. On this episode of Politically Speaking, Hoskins explains why he thinks 2023 will be the year sports betting finally crosses the legislative finish line, and he discusses efforts to overhaul the initiative petition process. Let's hit the music.
This is the Politically Speaking podcast, the definitive show about Missouri politics.
We have to talk about things that matter to people.
I've tried to bring that same aggressive, iconoclast style with me to the United States Senate.
I think my district is a model for the state.
We put Missourians first.
You just kind of have to find the common ground with people.
I believe that this district deserves someone who represents their values.
After I came back to St. Louis, I started thinking that I could have a bigger role on the change that I wanted to make.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, St. Louis Public Radio political correspondent Jason Rosenbaum. Joining me from Jefferson City, Missouri, she is St. Louis Public Radio State House and politics reporter
Sarah Kellogg.
And joining us, I assume, from his home in Warrensburg, Missouri, he is the state senator for Missouri's 21st Senatorial District?
Correct.
And what is your name, sir?
Yes, State Senator Denny Hoskins from Warrensburg. I represent the 21st Senatorial District here in the state.
And you're in an interesting redistricting situation, and it's only interesting for people like me because it has really no impact on your future legislative trajectory since you are term limited after 2024. But you don't actually live in the district you represent anymore. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, starting on January 4th, when the new senators are sworn in, the 21st district will actually shift, and I lose 4 counties out of the 8 in my current legislative district. So I lose Johnson County, Warrensburg, where I currently live. I lose Carroll County, Caldwell County, and Livingston County. And then I pick up parts of Cooper County, so Boonville, Missouri, and the surroundings, and pick up part of Clay County near Kansas City. So for the next 2 years, I will still be the senator for the 21st district, but I will live in Warrensburg and be represented by State Senator Rick Bratton.
So it's like that district gets 2 senators for the price of 1 for 2 years. But I think we've spent enough time going down the redistricting rabbit hole, which is far behind us.
Yes,
that was a big part of 2022. What are your expectations for 2023, especially because congressional redistricting is now but a beloved memory?
Yes, thankfully, congressional redistricting is a beloved memory, and I was very adamant about making sure that both military bases stayed in the same legislative or congressional district, Fort Leonard Wood and Whiteman Air Force Base, and so I was very passionate about that, and obviously ruffled a few feathers along the way to make sure that they stayed in the same congressional district. But it was very important to me living in Warrensburg with Whiteman Air Force Base, because having both military bases in the same congressional district meant that our new congressperson, who's elect Mark Alford, he will have an opportunity to be on the Armed Services Committee, and that's a very powerful committee.
So what are your expectations now for this upcoming session, now that is kind of behind you?
Yes, I have pretty high expectations. I think there's many things that we want to get accomplished this next legislative session. I think some of the big things are gaming, sportsbook, and video lottery terminals in the state, and glad to talk about them. Initiative petition reform, IP reform is another big topic, as well as some social conservative issues I think that we left on the table last year, and including our Parents' Bill of Rights.
So, between last session and this upcoming session, the Conservative Caucus, which you were a part of, has dissolved. What do you think the impact of that will be?
Well, hopefully the impact is for the better. The Conservative Caucus was never meant to be something that we had that lasted a lifetime. We were just a group of conservative senators that wanted to kind of hold each other accountable and to kind of a higher standard. based on the Missouri Republican Party platform. Were we clones of each other? Most certainly we were not. I mean, we both had all had our own priorities, but wanted to learn more about what it was to be, a conservative, not only in the state of Missouri, but, in the United States. And so we did dissolve. Does that mean that that I'm not going to be passionate about some of the issues? Most certainly not. I'm going to continue to fight for what I think is right for my constituents and fight for conservative policies in the state.
And given his clashes with the now defunct conservative caucus, do you have confidence that Senate President pro tem-elect Caleb Rowden will be able to bridge gaps within the GOP in the Senate?
Yes, I'm looking forward. Senator Rowden and I have served together in the House for a while. We've both came in at the same time to the Senate. He is our President pro tem-elect, and so he and I have had discussions on priorities and how we can get things accomplished these next 2 years. I know he wants to get several things done, including those I mentioned before. I want to get several things done as well. And so we're looking to bridge the gap between, some of our former conservative caucus senators and some of the senators that were not part of the conservative caucus, and then the new senators that are coming in. We've got a great group of new senators that are coming in. Obviously, we're going to miss some of our seniors that did a really good job in the 8 years that they were there. But we've got a great group of new senators coming in from a wide variety of backgrounds. And so I think I'm very optimistic that we can get some things done this year.
So let's pivot to an issue that you mentioned in the first few minutes of the show, and that is sports betting.
Yes.
Can you explain to our listeners, let's just say legislation that you want passed is implemented, how would sports betting in Missouri work from a functional standpoint?
It would be very similar to Illinois and Kansas. Sportsbook in the state of Missouri. I filed when the Supreme Court of the United States said that, hey, it's up to the states in order to decide on if they want to allow sportsbook or not. I filed an amendment. I believe that was 5 years ago because it was already too late to file bills. And I filed a sportsbook, a version of sportsbook bills throughout the last 5 years. We actually there was a sportsbook only bill at the end of last session in May of 2022. It was a House bill that had come over to the Senate. I was not the handler of that bill. Senator Hageman was the handler of that bill. And so Senator Hageman and I actually come to a compromise on a sportsbook only bill that all the professional sports teams agreed to. St. Louis Cardinals, St. Louis Blues, Kansas City Chiefs, Kansas City Royals, the women's soccer team in Kansas City. And even I believe one of the casinos actually agreed to that sportsbook only bill that generated about $50 million to the state. However, the casinos said no, that they didn't agree to that. And Senator Hageman said, hey, if everybody's not going to agree to it, then I'm not going to bring it up. And so it died the last couple of weeks of session last year. And just based on my discussions with my colleagues, I went around the state, met with several of my colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, in the House and the Senate. There's a lot of support in order to get something done this year. And so I'm very hopeful that we can. I will say that, traveling around the state and talking about sportsbook in particular, a lot of people think that it's the golden goose. There's just all this money that's going to be coming in for sportsbook to the state of Missouri. Well, Kansas legalized sportsbook in this past September. During the month of September and October, they brought in a total of $275,000 in taxes. So that equates to about $1.6 million per year. That's just a drop in the bucket. That's hardly any revenue coming to the state. And in fact, when you look at other states like Illinois, who just added $10 million to their budget for problem compulsive gambling, and Michigan, which just added $8 million more for problem compulsive gambling, the problem compulsive gambling budgets of these two states are so much higher than the total amount of revenue that Kansas is bringing into the state. So it's just not a golden goose like everyone expects. I've also had some people say, well, now since Kansas passed it first, they're going to use all that money coming in from sportsbook to lure the Kansas City Chiefs to Kansas. Well, 100 years from now, they'd have about $160 million in a pot to lure the Kansas City Chiefs over to Kansas. So if Kansas City Chiefs would decide that they wanted to move to Kansas, which I've had discussions with them, their preference is to stay here in Missouri. That pot of money that Kansas is building up is a long time coming.
Let's just say I wanted to place a bet that Grayson Allen of the Milwaukee Bucks is going to hit 7 3-pointers in a game. What would happen if I tried to place that bet now in Missouri on my phone or computer?
If you tried to place that bet on your phone, computer, iPad, even smart TV now, and used a legal sports book app, it would tell you that, hey, you're not within the boundaries that you can place a bet. So I know that in Kansas City, when Sportsbook went legal in Kansas, there were several Missourians on the Missouri side, but near the Kansas border, that tried to place bets. There's like it's called geofencing, a geofence that is surrounding the state of Kansas. And so you physically have to be in the state of Kansas in order to make a bet. And it's the same thing for Illinois as well. So it would just tell you that, hey, sorry, you can't place that bet. Now, there are some offshore sportsbook accounts. And so if you did get on an offshore sportsbook account, you could place that bet.
However, are using a VPN device as well, right?
Right, exactly.
If you legalize sports betting, what is the tax or fee that you would place on the bet? Or would it be like a fee that would be linked to somebody subscribing to Sportsbook that would go to the state? Explain like how the revenue would even be collected.
Yeah, so the revenue would be collected. It's a 10% tax. And so it would be a 10% tax or in the current bill on the casino. So the casinos would have to pay a 10% tax. Then there are also some license fees. In my bill, there could be up to 39 licenses. The casinos could have up to 3 licenses apiece. I think the first license is $100,000. The second license is $250,000. Third license is $500,000. And then each of the professional sports teams, including the St. Louis Cardinals and St. Louis Blues, would have one license, or they call them skins as well. So each one of them could have one skin. So if it passed, the St. Louis Cardinals could purchase their one skin and have, St. Louis Cardinals bet.com or something like that. And so you could actually download an app and make bets on the St. Louis Cardinals or the St. Louis Blues or Kansas City Chiefs or a whole college sports as well. So that's the main, as far as sportsbook goes, the main source of revenue would be that tax, the 10% that's in my bill, and as well as the fees. Now, casinos currently pay a 21% tax on their table games and slot machines and things like that. So a 10% tax is much less than what they're paying now.
Do you think the ability to have, skins was the reason why you think all of these sports teams went in on it? I'm curious as to how you got the agreement of the Blues, the Cardinals, the St. Louis City, all of those. I'm going to name St. Louis ones, but why were you think you were able to get kind of all of this support from the major sports teams?
Well, obviously it's revenue. So this is a new revenue source for those professional sports teams, and they can, the St. Louis Cardinals or Blues could sell those rights to. It's called a white label. So they could have the St. Louis Cardinals bet.com website and an app and promote that. Also within the bill is what they call an entertainment district that would be controlled by the teams. And so I forget if it's in it's 1 or 2 block radius of Busch Stadium. The St. Louis Cardinals would have control over what sportsbook apps could be advertised in that entertainment district. So, I mean, make no bones about it. This is all about revenue, and the casinos as well as professional sports teams see it as a way to help increase revenue for themselves.
And we'll get to revenue in one second, but I do want to know, you mentioned college sports too.
Yes.
What, kind of what are some limitations though on betting? If it allows college, does it go lower? I'm curious as to kind of what the restrictions are on what you can place bets on.
Right. So in college sports, if you want to bet on the MU Tigers, what we said is if you want to bet on the MU Tigers, a tier 2 bet. So tier 2 bets would be like, hey, the MU Tigers football team, the first offensive play is going to be a pass. Will it be a pass or will it be a run? And we in versions of my bill, we have said that, hey, those you could not have those type of bets for home state college sports teams. And so that's what we call a tier 2 bet. A tier 1 bet would be, hey, will the MU Tigers beat Wake Forest in the bowl game coming up? That's a tier 1 bet. That's pretty easy. It's much harder to affect the outcome of the game if someone was trying to cheat or if there was a scandal versus a run or a pass. And so we wanted to try and take some of those tier 2 bets out of especially the college scene. We also made it so betting on high school sports would be illegal. And so I don't think that's a very big issue, but we had some senators that were concerned about the possibility of high school sports being bet on. And most certainly we do have some high school powerhouse basketball and football teams in the state of Missouri that play teams from other states and things like that. So we made that illegal. So as far as the, back to the college ranks, we want people to be able to bet and have fun doing it. We also want them to be responsible, and we want to make sure that no one gets in trouble. Everything's above board.
Getting back to revenue, what would you use the revenue for that you gain from sports betting?
Well, as far as sports betting goes, according to the Missouri Constitution, you have to use that revenue for education in the state. And we've had several different versions about where that would go, whether that would go to higher ed or if that would go to K through 12, whether it would go to help fund the transportation line in K through 12, to help school districts with their transportation costs, whether it would go to the foundation formula. We've had different versions where it would go to STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math programs. And so it just has to be used toward education as far as the taxes go. Now, the fees can be used for anything. And so we have to charge enough fees to make sure that the state of Missouri can administer the program, the sportsbook program. Currently, I think in our last fiscal note, that was going to be about $1.6 million to $2 million. And then also compulsive and problem gambling in the state. So in my bill, Senate Bill 1, it says that $5 million has to go toward compulsive problem gambling. That is what the experts in that field have said that we needed in the state of Missouri as a minimum to combat any increase in problem compulsive gambling. If there's any money left, I want it to go toward our veterans' homes and cemeteries. So the overall budget, I guess, for sportsbook in the state of Missouri, gross taxes would be about $10 million or a little less than $10 million. Once you take out $5 million for problem compulsive gambling, and then another $2 million to administer the program, you're talking about bringing into the state less than $3 million net. That's just not very much money. Then that money could go toward our veterans' homes and cemeteries and things like that. However, we as the Missouri legislature had to supplement our veterans' homes and cemeteries budget by about $50 million from general revenue this year. And so we would still need another $47 million dedicated funding source in order to do that. And that's where the discussion comes in on video lottery terminals. Video lottery terminals are like video poker and video slot machines, and they would generate over $250 million to the state. So in order to have a dedicated funding source for our veterans' homes and cemeteries, sportsbook alone won't do it. And so that's why, in my opinion, we need to pass video lottery terminals as well.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I want to get into that. So why did this issue get intertwined with, so-called gray machines? And if you want to kind of talk to our listeners about kind of what those are.
Yes. Well, currently, you go into a truck stop, a gas station, bar, restaurant, VFW, American Legion, Elks, Moose Lodge. Many times you see what look like video poker machines. Now, those are what we call gray games. If you talk to the owners of the gray games, they say they are legal in the state of Missouri because they're not really gambling, because you can press a button, a pre-reveal button, and it shows if that game, if you're going to win or lose on that next try. Now, we have video lottery terminals in the state of Illinois as well as Pennsylvania, and they are the legal option there. And so those games are not pre-reveal games. And what I would like to do is see a legal regulated form of video lottery terminals be able to be in our truck stops, bars and taverns and fraternal organizations. These would be regulated by the Missouri Lottery. They pay 36% tax on those machines. 32% would go to the state, 4% to the local municipality. And they would generate over $250 million to the state that would go toward education, as well as go toward our veterans' homes and cemeteries. So, I have a lot of small business owners that would love to have a legal, regulated form of video lottery terminals in their business. They're a little skeptical of using the gray games because there's been some lawsuits filed on those, and some of those lawsuits have gone both ways. There's some current lawsuits regarding the current gray games that are out there now. But like I said, in order to, Senate Bill 1's entitled Honoring Veterans and Supporting Missouri Education Act. And so in order to have a dedicated funding source for our veterans homes and cemeteries, which I have a veterans home in Warrensburg. I also have a veterans cemetery in Higginsville, Missouri. The veterans are very important to me, with Whiteman Air Force Base being in my current district as well. I want to make sure we honor that commitment. And in order to make up that dedicated funding source of $50 million, Sportsbook alone won't do it, and video lottery terminals would.
Let me take a wild guess. Missouri's casinos absolutely do not want what you're proposing. Am I wrong?
No. The ironic thing is, though, that Missouri casinos actually own some of the video lottery terminal routes in the state of Illinois as well as Pennsylvania. So the casinos, they own the casinos, they own some of the VLT routes in those states. However, their answer to any legal regulated form of video lottery terminals in the state of Missouri has always been no.
What types of things are in your bill to prevent people from becoming addicted to online sports betting?
Well, number one, I think it's 1-800-BETS-OFF so you can call if you think you have a problem. You can put yourself on a no bet list. And so, you would, if you tried to call in and make a bet, you could, it would allow you to do that. And then in my bill, it puts $5 million for problem and compulsive gambling help. Not just a 1-800 number that you call and like 1-800, I think it's 1-800-BETS-OFF, but not just a number and then they refer you somewhere else where you hopefully can get help. But I wanted to make sure that, hey, the help was there and $5 million should be able to do that.
We'll be right back on Politically Speaking with State Senator Denny Hoskins. And we're back on Politically Speaking with State Senator Denny Hoskins. He is a Republican from Warrensburg who represents the 21st Senatorial District. I want to move on to a topic you also alluded to at the beginning. You were very good at outlining what we were going to talk about anyways, so Congratulations on that. And that's initiative petitions. Many Republican lawmakers have cited a initiative petition overhaul as a big priority for the 2023 session. So I want you to be specific. What would you want to change about the current process?
Well, I think the current process is just broken, and it puts a lot of emphasis on getting enough signatures, not caring really where those signatures come from. And so there's a lot of different ideas out there as far as initiative petitions. I'm open to many of those ideas. I'd like to have us have a discussion on the Senate floor about how we could effectively change the initiative petition process, not to stifle anyone's voice or anything like that, but to get more input from throughout the state. In fact, I was talking to a senator yesterday who talked about an idea about not only if an initiative petition or a vote of the people for a particular issue, let's say Amendment 3 with the marijuana that just passed, it would have to pass not only a majority of Missourians would have to pass that, but in a majority of House districts, that issue would have to pass, which was kind of a unique a way of looking at things. So, it passed, I think, 53, Amendment 3 passed, maybe 53% yes and 47% no. But then you'd have to go look at each individual House district, and there's 163 House districts. So there would have to be 82 House districts that said yes to that issue in order for it to pass as well. There's, with IP reform, there is no limit on the number of ideas that there are out there and how we can change that. I think to better reflect the values in the state. Some states don't even have initiative petition. I believe the state of Kansas does not have initiative petition. So in the state of Kansas, if you want to put something on the ballot, you can't even do that. It has to be put on the ballot by the legislature. Now, no one I've talked to has suggested that, but they've talked about, like I said, just getting a better representation from the entire state on many of these ballot issues.
Now, we could talk about the goodness or badness of all these ideas for the next 4 hours, but the reality is, like, you would have to put something on the ballot to change the initiative petition process, especially amending the Constitution. So, for example, in the idea that you just mentioned, voters would actually have to approve that before subsequent initiatives are done like that. And in the socialist utopia of Arkansas recently, when they tried to raise the threshold to 60%, it failed miserably. Why would there be a different result in Missouri if you tried to make it more difficult to amend the Constitution?
I think it's all number one, how you present that question. And we had some of this with Clean Missouri and Cleaner Missouri. Clean Missouri passed, I don't remember when that was, 2016 or
Clean Missouri, which set up a new state legislative redistricting system, among other things, passed in 2018. Quote unquote, Cleaner Missouri passed in 2020, which basically repealed that system and replaced it with something else.
Yeah. So what happened there in 2018, I think the eye candy of that bill, now there were several different things that I would argue should have been separate questions on the ballot anyway. I think they combined many of the things as far as redistricting, or how districts were formed in 2018 in Clean Missouri. They combined that with elimination of or taking lobbyist gifts down to $5 and things like that. So in my mind, there was many things that were not related that should have been separate questions on that. And then, for using this example in 2020, basically the eye candy was, hey, we're eliminating all lobbyist gifts. So we took that $5 threshold and moved it to zero. But in my mind, the real major tweaks of that bill weren't elimination of the $5 gift, by lobbyists, but it was going back to what I believe was a reasonable way to do the redistricting that did not have a state demographer and things that were appointed by the state auditor and things like that. So I think that if we're going to change the initiative petition process for a way that more accurately reflects the values and thoughts of the state, it's going to have to probably be combined with something else. If many times we've had issues, for example, I think it was Amendment 1 here in 2022 that talked about allowing the state treasurer to do some different investments that were still safe and had very, very low risk, but it failed. It failed on the ballot because there was no one that was really pushing that. There was no money behind being for that amendment or against that amendment, versus Amendment 3, which there was no opposition to Amendment 3, the making recreational marijuana legal to the state. There was not a concerted collective effort that was funded by groups.
I was just going to say, there definitely was opposition to Amendment 3, but it was underfunded opposition.
Yes, it was definitely underfunded opposition. And I know the proponents of Amendment 3, they were able to put millions and millions of dollars into getting that passed, where it passed by, like I said, 6%. So I think in order to get something passed with initiative petition reform, it would have to be a funded endeavor in order to make those changes happen. And perhaps put something else in there, like they did in Clean Missouri and Cleaner Missouri, as far as the lobbyist gift ban that is very popular amongst the Missourians.
Well, with Amendment 1, I think part of maybe the pushback against Amendment 1 was also the additional ability. It wasn't just the investment. It also allowed the legislature to make possible changes and allow for those investments. So that might have been also a reason for the no. And so I guess my question is on messaging, because I know some of the bills last year on initiative petition, one of them was, I think it said like a majority of 50% of voters, which makes sense. But then the fine print was 50% of registered voters, which is an incredibly high threshold. So how do you think you're going to get the messaging across without maybe it appearing deceptive? I'm curious how you're going to hammer home why this is a good thing for Missouri.
Well, I think, we've got 34 state senators, and we'll have probably 34 different ideas on how exactly to make that happen. Some of my colleagues, I'm sure, just like the status quo and like the process the way it is. And I've got some of my colleagues that want to overhaul everything. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I think that it's too easy to put something in our Constitution. The Constitution, in my mind, it is very sacred, and maybe it should take a higher threshold to make a change in the Constitution. And when we have these constitutional amendments that haven't been vetted through the legislature, you're basing many people are basing their vote on a 30-second TV ad that they've heard, and if one side is a lot more funded than the other side, they may not hear any opposition to that particular issue. And so I think that we definitely need to have the discussion. Again, there's, like I said, 34 state senators and 34 different ideas on what the best way for initiative petition reform is. But I think in the end, we want something that saves and protects the values of all Missourians in the state, not just those in St. Louis or those in Kansas City, or not just those always that are in rural Missouri, but really reflects the values of the entire state. And under the current initiative petition process, and in my opinion, many times it doesn't do that. When medical marijuana passed and was put on the ballot and put in the Constitution, I had many concerns about that. In fact, we had to come back and fix some things because, in my opinion, I have a huge problem with kids getting access to marijuana in general, now recreational marijuana. And so if companies are making gummy bears that are in the shape of a gummy bear or a Santa Claus or something like that, is that really appealing to adults, or is that more appealing to kids? And in my opinion, that was appealing more to kids. And so we passed some legislation, and I offered amendments that said that, hey, on marijuana, if you're going to have gummies, it's got to be, circles, squares, or triangles. You can't have, Spider-Man and Pokemon and different things like that. And I also said that, I've been to other states where they've passed medical marijuana as well as recreational marijuana. And many of these, these candy bars that are infused with THC look like a real candy bar. You might have a Twix candy bar and it looks it's got the gold wrapper with red lettering. It says Twix, but it has 2 X's on the end instead of just one. Well, a kid's, not going to know that, hey, that's a candy bar that's infused with marijuana. It has a high THC content. So I offered some amendments, and after medicinal marijuana was passed, in order to put some protections on there that says that, hey, it has to say THC infused on there, and just in order to protect our kids. As a law-abiding, adult citizen, if you want to partake in that, Missouri voters have spoken and said, yes, you can do that for medicinal purposes or recreational purposes now. But I want to make sure that those marijuana products don't fall in the hands of kids or be confused by a kid that, like I said, it has Kit Kat with 2 T's on the end instead of one, and they mistakenly take that.
There are going to be some people who don't like the 2019 abortion ban, who are going to see all these efforts to curtail initiative petitions as a way to derail what looks like an inevitable 2024 constitutional amendment to repeal that ban and replace it with something else. Why are they wrong?
Initiative petition reform is something that we've talked about. I mean, I've been in the legislature for 14 years, and we've talked about it for several years. And my predecessors before me have talked about different things as well, and different options as far as initiative petition reform. So this is something that discussions have gone on for years and years and years. Maybe this finally puts those different recommendations to a head because of the abortion ban. But this is not something new. It's not something that we've never talked about in the Missouri legislature. We've just never been able to find a consensus. And so, this next year, I'm hopeful that we can find consensus.
There are Republican consultants out there that make millions of dollars off of ballot initiatives. And if there is a initiative to make it harder for those things to pass, I could see them being heavily incentivized to fund a no campaign and work with Democrats who don't like this idea because they see this as the main way to get their policy done. What do you think about that? Do you think that that's a likely scenario?
Well, I'm not a lobbyist and have no intent to be one. But yes, most certainly, I work with lobbyists, contract lobbyists from different organizations and groups that I'm with them on one issue, and then they come in with a different group of folks or different group of my constituents, and I'm against them on that issue. So, the contract lobbyists are going to do what, and campaign consultants are going to do what they're going to do, and that is they're going to represent their clients to the best of their ability, and I'm going to continue to represent my constituents to the best of my ability. I can't control what the consultants do and lobbyists do and don't do, but most certainly, that's you're right. I know there's several consultants and lobbyists that work on these different statewide ballot initiatives and ballot issues, and if it's harder to do that, they may be against that, but based on what I've seen from political consultants and lobbyists, there's a lot of other revenue streams out there that they could partake in.
Somebody may see some proposal like the one you explained with the House districts are saying like a constitutional amendment needs 60% instead of 50+1.
Right.
And they may be like, wait a minute, this only requires 50+1 to put it in the Constitution. That doesn't make any sense. Like, should any of these initiatives that you're talking about that make it harder to amend the Constitution have a clause in it that say it only goes into effect if 60% or 82 House districts end up approving this?
Well, that's a good question. It's a way of turning it into around a little bit. No, I think we're going to play by the rules that we have in front of us right now, and so where it's 50+1, and so if we can get something on the ballot to change the Constitution, to amend the way that initiative petitions are approved in the state of Missouri, then we're going to follow the way that the law is currently written.
We'll see, though, if it succeeds or fails like it does in what I am really enjoying calling Arkansas a socialist utopia, Sarah, by the way.
Yeah, having reported there, can report, not true.
Okay. On that note, Senator, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about these really important issues. Politically Speaking is a product of St. Louis Public Radio, which is a part of the University of Missouri St. Louis. You can find all of our stories at stlpr.org. And Senator, how could people find out more about you on social media or any other place in the World Wide Web?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter I think it's at DL Hoskins, or you can find me on Facebook, again, Denny Hoskins page on Facebook. And then you can also subscribe to my Capitol Report. If you get online, the Senate webpage, senate.mo.gov, you can subscribe to my Capitol Report as well.
Thank you very much, and until next time, so long.